All right. I want to give you exactly what you expect of me, which is come on stage to like Sheila E., right? That's what you came here to see. Does anybody know that song, The Glamorous Life? Have you heard that? All right. And people that remember that, we're having a Metamucil meetup later for the old folks. Does anybody know who wrote or produced that song? Some people know. It's Prince. Yeah, it's important because we got to know who made this. Like, he's not mentioned in the liner notes, so how could one tell that song had Prince's involvement, other than the fact that I just played it and it's me, and that's all I talk about. For those of you who don't know, my name is Anil Dash, but you know who I am, because I'm not really a shrinking violet. You might know me better as this version of Anil Dash, which is the obnoxious Twitter presence that I have. But in short, one of the big things I did learn from Prince is that it is possible to love yourself so much that everybody else does too. And that's what I'm here to do. So that song, I'm just going to pretend you do. So that song, Glamorous Life, that came out in 1983. And I'm just talking about Prince for a while, so just get comfortable. One of the biggest hit that Prince had that year in 1983 was another song called 1999. Some of you have heard of it. And it was about a faraway, distant future, 16 years in the future, the year 1999, which has come up a couple times today of people talking about the dot-com bubble and where we were then. And I realized that to the people of 1999, the faraway 16 years in the future version that they would be looking at is today. It's 2015, right? We are as far from 1999 as it was when that song came out. And it's interesting because that's also when I started blogging. Some of the other folks in the room started blogging then, or started interacting with social media, or a lot of us realized, okay, the internet was where we were going to live our lives. And I thought, for the younger folks who have been hearing a lot about all these older websites and these people that have been writing on the internet since the last century, I would do a little bit of a recap, because if you were a time traveler from 1999 and you came to today in 2015, you would find unimaginable innovation, just incredible progress that has happened. For example, back in 1999, people made smartwatches that you would wear on your wrist in order to tell the time with the power of the internet. Whereas today, everything is different. It's completely different. Also back in 1999, people would get very, very excited about digital currencies that inarguably would change the way we spend our money and the way we pay each other. How could they not transform the entire economy with that kind of technology involved? Of course they would. There's also enormous investment in 3D headsets and virtual reality that would transform how we shop, how we play, how we live. This is the future clearly that lay in front of us back in 1999, but is reality today. And then you could even come to events like this. Those of you who were here a couple years ago got to hear Ev Williams talk about a bold future in which he made a blogging tool that could give voice to anybody on the internet. This is what the internet promises. Nobody could have foreseen this last century. It's impossible. How would you know? It has been unimaginable innovation. So we had, I just love the old people showing me love. It's so nice. We're all we'll go talk about how our backs hurt later. It'll be great. So in some ways we got the internet we expected. We thought, well, maybe somebody will build that thing, and then somebody built that thing, and that was kind of how it turned out. And then, in some ways, actually, the internet was better. Even the things that we couldn't imagine then, like the fact that I can send a WhatsApp message to my cousin in a rice paddy on the other side of the world is amazing. We got those other 2 billion people online, and I didn't think that would happen. But perhaps you've noticed not everything on the internet is better than we thought it might be for those of us that were around back then. I think we thought, oh, well, there's some trolls on Usenet, but certainly we wouldn't give over the internet to them and arm them so that they could be even worse. Or I think about, well, back then, most of my friends that were interested in social media, the technology companies building a lot of the early social apps were, about half the founders were women. Certainly that ratio wouldn't go down over the interceding 16 years. That's impossible. So we had these goals about what we thought the internet was going to be and how it was going to empower us. And in some ways it was great. A lot of us made these friends, these connections. Most of the people I know in this room, the reason I'm here is the connections I made back then. But we have forgotten a little bit, I think, about what we thought the internet was going to do for us. how it was going to open doors, how it was going to connect each other. Like that idealistic view of what was possible sort of drifted. And I said I started blogging back in 1999. Just to give you an idea how long ago that was before the word blogosphere was coined. This horrible piece of jargon. Does anybody here know where the word blogosphere came from? Who invented it?
Dave Weiner.
Prince and Dave Weiner are great answers. Neither are factual, but they're both better probably than the factual answer. No, the factual answer, it was a friend of mine named Brad Graham. And if you knew him, give him a hand. He was an incredible man. So he's not somebody, there's no Wikipedia page for Brad. On paper or like on his LinkedIn profile, if he had one, he would be listed as a director of a theater in St. Louis. And you say, well, what does that guy have to do with the internet? But in addition to, he coined the word blogosphere literally as a joke about what's the most awful kind of jargon that could possibly be used to describe social media. And, in one of his rare errors, he underestimated just how awful a word could be and have the internet still embrace it. But he also did things like bring a lot of us together and in person to break bread at South by Southwest and other events. And he would do things like observances of World AIDS Day. Back in 1998, when there were about 20 blogs on the internet, he got everybody to sort of center around a cause and actually, amplify messages around it, and thought that maybe what would come to be called social media could be used for a purpose. This was baked into the culture of social media right from its start. And he's not somebody, as far as I know, that even has a Wikipedia page, right? So what he did was incredible. It brought a lot of us together, and he's been gone for about 4 years now, but it still is something that deeply influenced a lot of the people that made even some of the tools and services you use today. Similarly, somebody like Leslie Harpole, who was incredible, and I know, feel free to applaud for any of the folks I'm going to talk about. They were incredible. And Leslie was with Smug and Hoopla and her other sites, was one of the first people to really think about how to use the net to tell stories where you were vulnerable and deeply personal, but in a way that was universal and drew people in. And I think actually influenced the voice of so many early web writers. I'm sure all the folks talking about Suck read her work and were influenced by it, but also just fun projects. Like she would do an advent calendar every year for Christmas that was just engaging and fun and funny and really inventive at how to use the internet. It wasn't a startup. It wasn't some billion-dollar company. It was just something she made. She was a maker, and it was a side project like a lot of you do on the weekends and when you get some time to build something. That was just a way to make the internet better and teach people what it could be. There were even art projects like Michael Sippy, who's here, worked with Leslie on Click to Add Title, which was PowerPoint being used to create art. And it was absurd and funny and smart and thoughtful and deeply inspiring to me. And I think that sort of thing is what the spirit of the internet was for a lot of us and what drew us in the first place. Another story I love to tell, Aaron Hawkins. He was incredible. Aaron did a lot of things. One of the things that jumped out to me most was his blog was called Uppity Negro and was the first site that I saw speaking in a really deep way about social justice, about structural racism. And I think today, I don't think any of the brilliant young folks that are leading the Black Lives Matter movement probably know Aaron's name or know what he did, but he absolutely paved the way for thinking about, well, all this time we spent online could be used to better us all. And there's no Wikipedia page for him. There is one for Aaron Swartz, whom I'm sure a lot of you know the name. And and he was incredible, absolutely an inspiration. But the movie version, the book version of Aaron Swartz is this activist, martyr, and he was all those things. But he also made just a lot of weird web projects. This was a young guy that would go on the weekends and build like a tool so you could access the archives of the New York Times, or some little coding tool that might assist you if you're building an app. And those things are as much a part of his legacy on a daily basis as the big important projects. But we don't treat them equally, even though those might have been how a lot of us discovered his work or discovered his genius. And so even for the best known of names like these, we forget. We forget that the web and the internet, and certainly social media, included queer voices and black voices and women's voices from day one. We were always here. We were always here. And this is something that is so important because one of the things I think about a lot is creative people. Any of us that are sort of drawn to an event like this, to a moment like this, to see somebody else's work and be inspired by it, one of the first questions we often ask is, who made that? Who was behind it? Like, what was the story? And if you're a music fan like me, who's like old school, like you would get a record and read the liner notes. I remember poring over Thriller and seeing, oh, well, Quincy Jones produced this and Rod Temperton wrote that song. And it was meaningful to me. It was like, this was how the work happened. And it wasn't just that person on the stage. It was lots of people creating something brilliant together that changed culture. Or maybe you were into DVD extras. For me, like same thing, of like the making of Michael Jackson's Thriller. I wore that videotape out. You know, I wanted to know everything about how it was made and how they did the choreography. And so everyone in these creative disciplines that know they impact the world, they document it. You know, you can go be on Netflix and be flipping through a couple of different shows and see somebody in the background in one shot, and 2 seconds later know every single movie they were ever in. And these stories are folklore. It's what people do within a creative community to share their stories with each other. But in the digital world and the tech world, we don't really have that. Right? Now, there are some exceptions. There actually is a great site called folklore.org, which is a history of the people that made the original Mac and a lot of the apps around it. It's an incredible document. And even if you're like not really into Apple or into the Mac or whatever, you can just see the care and the thought of people that built this thing. And it's an amazing document of a historical moment in time. But that's the Mac and that's Apple, right? Like that's this extreme example of success and cultural impact. But there are lots of things, like most of those names I mentioned to you probably aren't that familiar to you, and all their projects aren't familiar to you. And they're just as important, but where do we go to find out what they did? More importantly, what do we do to remember what we've learned so we don't keep making the same products and the same mistakes over and over and over? Now, this is one of the most important things we can do. Because you think about, I talk to like young people. I'm very lucky. I get to talk to folks that are like, I'm going to build an app, and I'm going to build a community on the web, and I'm going to build a site. And they say, well, I'm worried about if it fails. And they say, well, what if it succeeds? And like, what do you mean? It's like, well, there are things you can expect if your site succeeds. And they're like, well, what do you mean by that? And it's like, well, we know what the internet is made out of. Right? It's very clear what kinds of people, and then there's some like non-people that are in there. And if you're really lucky and you build exactly the right site, then like the breastfeeding advocates will come to your site and the lactivists will be mad at you too, right? Like this is how the internet works. And it's kind of great. But the only way we know that is if we tell each other that. And where would you go to learn from a site that is incredible and inspiring to you and somebody built it? Or even if you're just like, well, I use Instagram every day and I look at that app, and maybe if I'm a super nerd, I know the name of the founder because that was in some article in some magazine. But who made the app that's actually on my phone, in my hand? I have no idea. And what did they learn? What mistakes did they make? Could it be somebody like me that maybe made that thing? How would I know? Truth is, we just don't know who makes the internet. We know a couple stories of mostly dudes who are promoted as being these brilliant founders and treated as if they worked alone, and that ain't how the internet was made. What is best on the internet, what drives us to love technology and to be creative in these ways, has very little to do with what makes startups really wealthy. They're different stories. So I started to think about, well, why don't we know who made the internet? And what are the things that we can change? Like, I can't change who the VCs want to promote and who the press wants to cover. I've tried. And maybe we can shift that a little bit. But what's the biggest reason that creative people like the folks in this room don't always get their just due for what they make? And I thought a lot of it boils down to aesthetics. It's the difference between your shirt and my shirt, right? Because I can come on here and say, you know who I am, you know my name. And to some people, it'll be like, this is the most obnoxious asshole at this conference, right? Which is probably true. I'm okay with it. I love me. I love me. And I do. I love you too, but I love me. And I just really, and I thought, if I can be loud enough about shouting, not just about myself, but about all these other people who are undersung, maybe we can widen the window to where it feels okay to people who are creative to say, well, I made something too. And what I made matters too. And it's hard because I think normal people who aren't as full of themselves as I am, if it feels vulnerable. It feels really hard to put yourself out there. And what comes of that is I often see brilliant people. I get this chance, like people send me their apps. Like, oh, I made this thing, I want you to check it out. And I see people put their heart and soul into a project for weeks or months or years. And then like late at night one night, they'll send out a tweet that says, I made a thing, and a link. And that's it. And it could be brilliant, or it could be terrible, but it exists. And it sort of just lands out there with a thud. And then they wonder, well, how come the world didn't like it? I guess it wasn't very good. And if I can give 1% of my horrendous obnoxiousness to you, to keep you from making that mistake of saying, well, I made a thing, and actually say, I made something, and I put a lot of work into it, and I care about it, and it's important to me, and I want to show it to the world. Or I made a thing years ago with my friend, and you know what? Nothing came of it, but we had fun, and we learned some stuff, and maybe you'll want to check it out or learn about what we did. There's this question of who made that keeps coming up. And the answer to it is really, well, we have to tell those stories, either about ourselves or about our friends or about those who are gone, and say, there are these things that they made that are incredibly important. So when I thought about the question of what did you make, I thought, this is a thing that I can help with. And my co-founder, Gina Trapani, and I started working on a project back at the beginning of the year that eventually we called Makerbase. And the idea behind it was just simple. It lives at this website, and you would go to it and just list the stuff you made, like IMDb, but for apps and websites. And this is Matt Howie's page. Matt's awesome. He's incredible and creative and inspiring. And if you're Matt and you just make tons of stuff, like you will have a ton of stuff. I'm a lousy coder, so like I don't have a lot of projects, but what was really heartening is I looked at Matt's list and he had a project called 10 Years of My Life. And if you notice, it lasted for 2 years. Yeah. And I thought, this is my kind of maker. Yes, this is the kind of inspiration I need, which is to say, somebody brilliant, who's a genius, who's made amazing things that are meaningful to so many of us, also had these things that just kind of like went along until they ended, and then that was the end of it. And that's part of the story of creation. That is what it is to be witness to the act of creation, is there are dead ends, and there are these ideas that don't necessarily land, and there are people you work with. This is a list of people that Matt has made projects with over the years. And you can see that sometimes people who make something that succeeds, they paired up with someone and had 2 or 3 or 4 projects before that either didn't go anywhere or were just a lark before they figured out how to get the best out of each other. And this is also more meaningful to all the people who are underrepresented or excluded from building technology, from being in the tech industry, because you start to see how the network works. In some ways, maybe it's an old boys network that you can't get into. But in some cases, maybe it's a way of saying, well, hey, maybe one of these people is approachable. Maybe if they keep working together, I can be part of that team. And you can imagine yourself in their shoes. And so I just keep coming back to this question of who made that. And the answer has to be that we have to tell each other stories. Now, we made Makerbase hopefully as a way to help tell the stories of what you made and what other people made and who worked together with whom. But, honestly, you can write it on a cocktail napkin and fax it to somebody, just as long as you tell the story. It's so important to document what we create. And one of the biggest reasons why, like, inclusion matters to me, getting people in the industry matters to me, accurately documenting our history matters to me. But part of it for me is just about being witness to the creative environment. Right? Just when you see the act of creation and you see how people come together and you get to picture how they make something amazing, it gives you permission to sort of imagine that for yourself. So I want to talk about one last thing, right back where we started, is when Michael Jackson was becoming a man from being a star in a boy band, decided he wanted to make his own albums. He got Quincy Jones to produce his first independent record, Off the Wall, one of the great records of all time. And the first song, the first single from the album, one of his signature songs, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. And typically, he recorded an early version of it at home with his then 9-year-old sister Janet hitting a bottle for percussion on it. And it's a great song. You've all heard it. And then when it came time to record it in the studio, the way these things would usually work is you would have had Quincy Jones say, I have some cat that I knew in the 50s who's going to be the drummer on this thing. And instead, they took a leap on a young Latina woman who had never recorded on a record that big before. And so the percussionist you hear on this song when it comes in is Sheila E., but she wasn't credited. She wasn't in the liner notes. But now, you know her story. Thank you.